everyone. I am Devin Ertel. I am the CISO at Menlo Security. I run all things security internally for Menlo Security. I've had over 20 years of security experience. It's been my whole career as a practitioner and a leader, and it's something I enjoy quite a bit. So I'm happy to be talking with everyone today about zero trust, which is a word we've always heard for a long time. And I think it's getting more, more and making more noise now than it ever has. Just a little quick slide about Menlo. Over 800 customers. We have tons of traffic going through our product. And if you can see some of our logos and customers we have, it's people that take security quite seriously. So they're on their zero trust journey, just as a lot of people are in different facets and different areas. But this is just a quick slide showing a little bit about us. So, like I said, zero trust, we've talked about it for a long time. And, zero trust is kind of an odd word to say because it's not really zero trust. It's basically trust what you really want to trust the least amount, least privilege. These words are almost interchangeable. But when it first started coming out, we all thought about it in a data center sense, right? So you have all these users coming into this nice, juicy core where maybe protections aren't the same. They're surrounded by firewalls. Traffic can usually flow pretty freely in between everything. And this has always been a problem. It's really been hard to solve. You're saying, fine, I got a VPN going in, but then when I drop them into this data center, I don't know, and I don't know what servers are connecting to what servers, and it's really hard to micro-segment this. And people do it, but it's definitely a challenge. I've been through it in the past as well. I can tell you as a previous pen tester, I loved getting a VPN access into this because it was almost like a nice little private tunnel for me to pivot into other things. So this is the traditional thing, and I don't think this goes away, but I think we need to rethink about how we actually are doing ZTNA. And that's where, internally, I'm thinking about it myself as well. And you can kind of see like the tenets of zero trust here. So, obviously verify and authenticate, least privilege, like I mentioned. Zero trust doesn't mean we don't trust anything. We have to trust something to allow business and users to do their job. So think about it as verifying who everyone is, authenticate them, give them the least amount of access that they need to do their job. Micro-segmentation, I touched on that as well. And that goes, in traditional sense, goes along the lines of network and where you can, but that can be a challenge. And then continuous monitoring and verification. So that user that you verified and authenticated, let's say their cookie got stolen and it's coming from somewhere else. So just because you authenticated it once, you do need to follow back up and continue to check to see, is that person still the same person? Are they doing the things that they're supposed to be doing? So it's an ongoing thing, the whole framework in itself. So this slide is just kind of outlining where people generally are in their ZTNA journey or zero trust journey. I'm not going to go through all this. Some of this might hit home for you. I know, like I said, for me, cost and complexity of legacy ZTA is definitely, I've run into that myself. Resistance to change. Sometimes, especially with the legacy stuff, it can cause a lot of change and can put work onto network teams and infrastructure teams. So it's a challenge and it's hard, and that's why I think we've been talking about it for so many years. Something that, is near and dear to my heart and Menlo's heart is the browser. I would say over the past, definitely 5 years, maybe a little bit more and more people are using the browser. It is it's basically an operating system now. I always say now that, you have phishing where a lot of attacks come from, that the browser is the other point the area that the attacker can reach out and touch the end user and make them do something unintended or compromise the endpoint. It's where they can interact with the user, just like an email. And you could even argue that emails, majority nowadays, are even through a browser as well. So I don't think traditionally we thought about locking the browser down, and thinking about how we secure the browser from these type of attacks, or allowing attackers to actually reach out and, like I said, touch the endpoint or the end user. And that's the way in. As we built up our firewalls and we protected our data centers, and we've done a really good job of that as a security industry. But this is one thing that I don't think on any fault of our own. I just think the usage of a browser just went way up, and then the attackers have realized that as well. These are some stats, and I think everyone, I don't need to push that, but like everyone is aware of phishing and getting things into the endpoint via a website or a browser. So typical ZT web security. So with all these logos and everything, the typical way, right? You have your firewalls, you're all going through that, they're checking AV, they're scanning for a bad website. That is the typical way that we've done this via a proxy. These are malicious websites and they're categorized. This is AV. The problem with that is, as we all know, an attacker can stand up a website immediately. They can compromise another website. And for these like filters to pick up takes time. So this is an easy thing to defeat just by saying a website is malicious or not and block it. You need real-time activity there. And that's where we thought, like, okay, well, sandboxing or AV in the middle here. Again, AV, as we all know, pretty easy to bypass as well. So we need something here to stop the attacker from being able to reach out and easily touch. Because these old methods of blocking this stuff they're outdated. Do they work still? Absolutely. But a determined attacker can easily bypass these archaic, I would even call them, defense mechanisms. So real world example, again, I'm not going to go over all this, but one attack is called HTML smuggling. Just think about it as the sense of a website. So a user accesses a malicious website. To get around the AV scanning, they can kind of chunk it up into different areas and send it to the user, and then essentially assemble it on the endpoint, thus bypassing all the AV, all the protections we put in over the years to get to the endpoint. And a lot of people, including myself, we rely on EDR or endpoint protection. I will say this though, like there's a couple of things bypassing this. One, I'd rather not have an EDR alert that my team gets spun up over. So blocking that and saving your team's time is a great thing to do here. And secondly, I don't know if I totally trust the EDR either, meaning I don't want that to be my only mechanism, right? Defense in depth. So if they're able to bypass all of the money and time I spent on detecting it in transit, I guarantee they're going to figure out a way to bypass EDR. So it would be the last thing where, that they would have to defeat. So that's just two things they have to defeat: to touch the user, touch the endpoint, and have a compromised endpoint. And once that's game over, in the sense of they can pivot and move on within the organization. So just at a high level, the way we think about it here, and I think a lot of people are starting to think about it, is having a cloud browser. It's something in the middle of that. So every use case is different. So you have unmanaged endpoints, you have the managed endpoint with the local browser, and then you have a managed endpoint you can put on with a client or whatever. But think of it this way, as these are small tunnels going through a cloud, basically isolation layer. So what that does is it gives you control, and in a couple aspects, actually. One, let's say they go to a bad website. this layer, this sandbox layer, will then allow that will run in the sandbox and not on the actual user's endpoint, thus stopping something from actually going and touching the endpoint itself. Other ways you think about it is like unmanaged endpoint. And let's say you want to throw an extension on them and you want them to legitimately access a SaaS app in your network or even outside your network. So either a private app or a SaaS app. You now have the control of saying, okay, well, this is let's just give an example of a contractor. This is a contractor. This user cannot download anything to the endpoint. I want to watermark it. So if they take screenshots, I want to disable screenshots. You can do all that. You can control it without ever having anything touch the endpoint with that sandbox layer in between. It really is, think about it, really is zero trust here. You're not trusting the endpoint. You're putting a separation in between them. And something else that you can do here too is this separation is also protecting the app. This unmanaged endpoint or managed, doesn't matter, does not see any request to the app. So cannot alter it, cannot do anything, cannot attack it. So you're really, that separation here is true zero trust. So protection against compromised endpoints. This is kind of what I was getting at here. So if you have a normal, let's say VPN or a normal proxy, all these requests can easily get through to your either internal app or your SaaS app. Now, if an untrusted endpoint could be managed, could be unmanaged. When I say untrusted, it could mean it's compromised or a malicious insider. When you create that sandbox in the middle, like I said, there is no way that user can actually alter the request. They can only interact with what they see on the website. So for things like an SQL injection get really, really hard as you cannot just iterate and change parameters. You have to do them on the actual, within the user interface of the website itself. On top of that, that allows you to do things like, I don't know, do you want to record the session? Do you want to put different policies in place? Like I said, if you want to have the user not be able to take screenshots or you want to watermark this and just, you can really tightly, you have much, much more control of what that user access rather than just a tunnel to that, that application. You get to control how that user interacts with that application. On top of that, a lot of attacks now, what they do is they compromise the endpoint and then steal the cookie. They can move that cookie to another host or like something that they control and then access it as if they were the user. So like I mentioned before, is sure you authenticated and everything there before, but you're not continually checking. With this sandbox, you can actually store cookies in the cloud, meaning if the endpoint is actually compromised, stealing that cookie just got next to impossible because it is not actually stored on the user's endpoint. So you're, again, creating this sandbox in the middle layer here that is really zero trust. And this is the end of the presentation. And you can follow us at these LinkedIn or looks like YouTube. And that is it for me.